What were the main ideas of the Enlightenment? How did they affect Western civilization, or civilization as a whole?
The Enlightenment, also known as the Age of Reason, was an intellectual and philosophical movement that dominated the world of ideas in Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries. The Enlightenment centered on the belief in reason as the primary source of authority and legitimacy, and it advocated such ideals as liberty, progress, tolerance, fraternity, constitutional government, and the separation of church and state. Main ideas of the Enlightenment included 1. Reason. Enlightenment thinkers believed that rational thought could lead to human improvement and was the most legitimate mode of thinking. They challenged the traditional authority of monarchies and the church, advocating for a society based on reason. 2. Skepticism. This was the practice of questioning whether claims could be supported by empirical evidence and rational thought. 3. Human autonomy. Individuals were seen as capable of thinking for themselves and not just relying on the authority of others. 4. Scientific revolution. The Enlightenment was heavily influenced by the scientific revolution that preceded it, with figures such as Isaac Newton providing inspiration for a systematic approach to learning and understanding. Secularism. There was a movement away from explanations and institutions based on religion towards humanistic and secular understandings. 6. Individual freedom and rights. Philosophers such as John Locke argued that individuals have natural rights, such as the right to life, liberty, and property, which governments should protect. Equality. Many Enlightenment thinkers advocated for the idea that all humans are fundamentally equal and that society should reflect that ideal. 8. Democracy and republics. The Enlightenment was critical in promoting the idea that power should be derived from the consent of the governed, and many Enlightenment thinkers supported some form of democratic or republican state. Cosmopolitanism and cultural exchange. There was an emphasis on the value of learning from other cultures and societies, with the belief that understanding could lead to progress. 10. Educational reforms. Enlightenment thinkers argued for the importance of education and knowledge in achieving progress and autonomy. The impact of Enlightenment ideas on Western civilization and the world has been profound. Democratic revolutions. These ideas influenced a number of significant political revolutions, including the American Revolution, 1776, French Revolution, 1789, and many subsequent struggles for independence and democracy around the world. Constitutional government. The Enlightenment ideas contributed to the creation of new forms of government that emphasized the protection of individual rights and the establishment of laws based on consent and rationality. Science and technology. The prioritization of scientific methods and empirical inquiry in the Enlightenment led to immense technological advancements and shaped the modern reliance on science and technology. Separation of church and state. The advocacy for secular governance led to a significant reevaluation of the role of religion in public life and governance, leading to an increase in secular institutions. Economic theories. Enlightenment thought also affected economic policies, with philosophers such as Adam Smith advocating for free market economies. Education. There have been substantial reforms in education aimed at broader dissemination of knowledge, which has contributed to the spread of literacy and the idea of public education. Human rights. The Declaration of Human Rights drew heavily on Enlightenment principles, and those principles remain at the core of international human rights law and discourse. In sum, the Enlightenment has been a central influence on the cultural, political, and social development of Western societies, and has impacted the global order through the establishment of democratic ideals, human rights norms, and the value placed on science and rational thought.
How did the Enlightenment influence the development of modern economic theories and practices?
The Enlightenment had a profound influence on the development of modern economic theories and practices. This period saw the rise of several pivotal economic ideas that would shape the future of economic discourse and policy. Here are several key influences. 1. Emergence of classical economics. Enlightenment thought provided the groundwork for the birth of classical economics, which advocated for the free market as an efficient mechanism for allocating resources. The emphasis on reason and scientific analysis led to the belief that economies could be understood, described, and engineered using rational principles. 2. Laissez-faire economics. Enlightenment thinkers like Adam Smith, who published The Wealth of Nations in 1776, championed the idea of laissez-faire economics, which argued that government should not overly interfere in business and trade. Smith's concept of the invisible hand suggested that through the pursuit of individual self-interest, a society could prosper as economic activities are automatically directed to beneficial ends. The role of self-interest. Enlightenment economic thinking often revolved around the idea that individuals acting in their own self-interest would naturally contribute to the overall good of society. This assertion challenged the previously more communal or state-centric views on economic organization prevalent in the mercantilist era. 4. Value and labor theory. The Enlightenment period also featured debates about the nature of value and the role of labor in creating value. Figures like Adam Smith and later David Ricardo developed the labor theory of value, which suggested that the value of a good is related to the labor required to produce it. 5. Property rights. John Locke, another influential Enlightenment thinker, had a significant impact on economic theories through his discourse on property rights. His assertion that individuals have natural rights to life, liberty, and property became foundational to the development of market economies and the legal frameworks that support them. 6. Utility and demand. Enlightenment thought also began to touch on the concept of utility and demand, which would later on be further developed into the demand-side economics. It began to foster an understanding that the value of goods is derived not just from labor, but also from their utility to consumers. 7. Economic freedom and progress. The philosophical underpinnings of the Enlightenment gave rise to the concept that economic freedom was a prerequisite for societal progress. This has influenced economic policies that favor open markets, economic liberalization, and trade. Banking and finance. In addition to Adam Smith and John Locke, figures such as Richard Cantillon and David Hume made early contributions to understanding banking, finance, and the money supply. Their work laid a foundation for modern monetary theory. 9. Moral and ethical considerations. The Enlightenment also prompted discussions about the morality and ethics of economic actions, a precursor to debates about corporate responsibility and the role of ethics in business practices. All these aspects have significantly molded the way modern economic systems function, including how governments understand their role in the economy, how businesses operate within market systems, and how individuals engage as consumers and producers. The legacy of the Enlightenment is evident in the ongoing discussions around economic policy, market regulation, and the ethical dimensions of economics.
How did Enlightenment thinkers reconcile the individual pursuit of economic self-interest with the ethical considerations and moral responsibilities of society?
Enlightenment thinkers approached the reconciliation of individual economic self-interest with ethical and moral considerations in society from various angles. Here is a synthesis of their thoughts and arguments. 1. Adam Smith's moral philosophy. Often remembered for his advocacy of the free market and self-interest, Adam Smith was also a moral philosopher who wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiments, which emphasized sympathy as an essential moral faculty. He believed that while individuals pursue their own self-interest, they are naturally inclined to care for others' welfare through innate sympathy. Smith's work suggested that the market, guided by the invisible hand, could function morally within a framework of natural human empathy and social norms. 2. The role of the market as a moral institution. Enlightenment thinkers argued that the market itself could act as a moral institution. The marketplace was seen as a sphere where voluntary exchange would occur, with all parties consenting to the terms of trade. When operating properly, this would ensure that no coercion was involved and that both parties benefited, promoting a form of moral economic interaction. 3. Legal and institutional frameworks. Thinkers such as Montesquieu and Smith stressed the importance of laws and institutions to foster the proper moral use of self-interest. These frameworks were envisaged to prevent the descent of self-interest into pure avarice by establishing and enforcing property rights and contracts. thus creating the conditions for a stable, fair, and predictable market. 4. Enlightened self-interest. Enlightenment thinkers posited that individuals, in pursuing their self-interest, would realize that the well-being of others and the society at large is a component of their own interest. This enlightened self-interest concept suggests individuals understand that a functioning society and economy create a context in which they can better pursue their personal goals. Education and public morals. Many Enlightenment philosophers believed in the importance of education and the cultivation of virtue. They argued that a well-educated public would act ethically and that the spread of knowledge would lead to better moral judgment by individuals in economic transactions. Meritocracy and fairness. The support for a merit-based system where individuals succeed based on their abilities and work ethic was often aligned with moral principles of fairness and justice. This challenged traditional hierarchical social orders where birthright and privilege determined one's economic status. 7. Social contract theory. Philosophers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Locke developed the idea of the social contract, asserting that individuals consent, either explicitly or implicitly, to surrender some of their freedoms and submit to the authority of the ruler or to the decision of a majority, in exchange for protection of their remaining. The moral obligation was then both on the individuals to respect the contract and on the society or state to ensure the common good. 8. Debate and discourse. Enlightenment salons, pamphlets, and books became forums for debating moral and economic issues. Public discourse and critique were viewed as mechanisms by which society could discuss, refine, and reach consensus on moral economic practices. Through these views and mechanisms, Enlightenment thinkers attempted to align the pursuit of self-interest with moral conduct, envisaging a society where economic liberty could coexist with and be balanced by ethical and societal responsibilities.
How did the concept of the social contract shape Enlightenment views on the rights and duties of individuals within a society, particularly in the context of economic behavior?
The concept of the social contract played a pivotal role in shaping Enlightenment ideas about the rights and duties of individuals, including their economic behavior. It provided a framework for thinking about the legitimate basis of government and the organization of society. Here's how this concept influenced views on individual rights and duties. 1. Foundation of authority. The social contract posited that legitimate political authority derives from the consent of the governed. Enlightenment philosophers like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau argued that individuals consent, either implicitly or explicitly, to surrender certain freedoms and abide by a set of rules in exchange for security and order provided by the state. 2. Natural rights and property. In the realm of economics, the social contract theory, particularly in Locke's version, emphasized that individuals have natural rights to life, liberty, and property. These rights were considered pre-existing in the state of nature, and the formation of a society and a government was intended to protect these rights, not to infringe upon them. Wealth distribution and fairness. Rousseau and other Enlightenment thinkers addressed concerns about the distribution of wealth. They asserted that the social contract should ensure fairness and equal opportunities. Rousseau, in particular, was critical of the extreme inequality he associated with private property and proposed that the government should implement policies to mitigate this. 4. Economic roles and social responsibilities. The social contract theory suggested that while individuals had the right to pursue economic interests, they also had social responsibilities. This included obeying laws, paying taxes, and contributing to the common good. Economic behavior was, therefore, not separate from ethical behavior and obligations towards society. Regulation of economic activity. The social contract also implied that governments could legitimately regulate economic activities to promote the common good, prevent exploitation, and maintain public order. However, Enlightenment thinkers differed in the extent to which they believed governmental intervention should occur. 6. Preservation of the marketplace. A functioning, stable market economy was viewed as a public good under the social contract. The government had a duty to maintain this by ensuring property rights, enforcing contracts, and providing a legal framework for resolving disputes. 7. The limitation of sovereign power. Reflecting on economic duties and rights, the Enlightenment social contract outlined limits to sovereign power. Absolute monarchy and arbitrary rule were replaced with the idea that rulers are accountable to the people, and that economic and other policies should reflect the general will. 8. Commercial societies and civic virtue. The concept of the social contract was also seen as essential in forming commercial societies that require a balance between self-interest and civic virtue. Trust, honesty, and fulfilling agreements were viewed not merely as moral obligations, but as economic necessities for the smooth operation of the market. Through discussions and debates about the social contract, Enlightenment thinkers laid the groundwork for current understandings of economic rights and responsibilities, regulation, social welfare, and the balance between individual freedoms and the needs of the community. These ideas have had a lasting impact on economic systems, government policies, and the interpretation of social justice in contemporary society.